Hundreds of Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants across the UK were forced to shut down over the weekend after the chain ran out, get this, chicken.
In Britain this morning, a shortage of chicken forces hundreds of KFC restaurants to shut down for days.
Don't eat at KFC in the UK again until you understand how things quietly began to fall apart. Because what's happening inside Britain's most familiar fried chicken chain didn't roar into existence. It crept softly, patiently. The kind of decline you only recognize once it's too late. A small dip in quality here. A strangely pale chicken piece there. A delivery that feels tired before you even open the box. And then, one day, you realize the ritual you trusted for years has transformed into something unpredictable. KFC didn't lose its way overnight. It happened in the way most institutions begin to fade slowly, subtly, while everyone was too busy believing everything was still fine. The kitchens looked the same. The menus looked the same. The colonels smiled the same. But beneath that comforting surface, the rhythm had changed. For decades, KFC was more than fast food to people in the UK. It represented a kind of everyday reliability. It wasn't a luxury meal or a gourmet experience. It was the food you turned to when life felt heavy, when you wanted something warm and familiar, when you needed a moment of uncomplicated comfort. Families built memories around it. Students survived exam weeks because of it. Friends bonded over late-night buckets. It was the unofficial sponsor of Friday nights, long drives, after-school stops, and small celebrations that didn't need cake. And that's why the shift feels so personal to so many people. When a part of your routine loses its trustworthiness, it doesn't simply disappoint you, it disorients you. People didn't fall out of love with KFC. They lost confidence in what they would receive. The meals became inconsistent, and inconsistency is the first sign that a system is struggling to keep itself together. To understand why the decline happened, you have to zoom out, because nothing this large collapses from a single mistake. Decline is almost always the result of pressure layers of it, applied over years until something finally begins to give. The rise before the slip. Before everything changed, KFC in the UK enjoyed something many brands spend fortunes trying to manufacture: generational loyalty. It was woven into everyday life so seamlessly that most people didn't even think of it as a choice. It was simply there, dependable, consistent. And consistency in food is everything. The recipe didn't need reinvention. The brand didn't need to chase trends. The chicken tasted the same whether you ordered it in Manchester or Milton Keynes. It was the culinary version of an old friend who always showed up in exactly the same mood. Comforting, predictable, reassuring. And that consistency wasn't accidental. It was the result of a tightly controlled System 1 where timing, training, supply, and preparation all had to work in perfect harmony. When the machine ran smoothly, every bite tasted like the advertisements promised. But the thing about tightly controlled systems is that they're also fragile. They can withstand pressure until the pressure becomes too much. Eventually, the harmony that made KFC so reliable began to feel the first tremors of strain, not enough to worry anyone. Not yet, but enough to form hairline cracks in a structure that had held steady for decades. The first sign of trouble. In February 2018, Britain witnessed something it didn't think was possible: a chicken chain without chicken. The day hundreds of KFCs closed their doors, people laughed at the absurdity of it. Memes spread, headlines mocked, but beneath the humor, something unsettling was revealed. KFC's supply chain, one of the most essential parts of its identity, was fragile, too fragile. A single logistical change caused nationwide closures. A chain that served millions every week fell apart because the deliveries didn't arrive on time. For most people, it was a funny, forgettable hiccup. For those paying attention, it was a warning, not because of the shortage itself, but because of what it signaled. A system stretched thin enough that one disruption could bring it to its knees. That moment wasn't the cause of KFC's decline, but it was the first time the public saw the cracks that insiders had noticed for years. Still, the chain recovered. The doors reopened. Chicken returned. Britain laughed, dusted off its shoulders, and kept moving. But the deeper issues, the ones that would eventually reshape the KFC experience, never truly disappeared. They grew. Quietly. The pressure inside. The pressure cooker. To understand what happened next, you need to step inside a KFC kitchen, not the front of house counter where everything looks calm and brightly lit, but the back, the real heart of the operation, where the noise is loud, the heat is heavy, and the pace feels like a marathon being run at sprint speed. Unlike other fast food chains that rely on pre-cooked patties or frozen components assembled like Lego bricks, KFC's product begins its life as raw, real chicken. Workers coat it by hand in seasoned flour, dip it, bread it, load it into baskets, lower it into pressure fryers, monitor it with trained eyes, lift it out, rest it, store it, rotate it, and move it into the hands of impatient customers. Every step matters. Every second matters. Every mistake echoes through the quality of the final meal. When the kitchen is fully staffed and breathing room exists between orders, this system is magical. It produces exactly what made KFC famous. But the moment the kitchen falls behind, or more accurately, the moment the kitchen is forced to handle more than it was built for, the quality suffers, and the decline is immediate. And this is where the dominoes began to fall. KFC kitchens, already demanding, started facing new pressures from every direction. Staff shortages, rising turnover, reduced training time, increased reliance on younger, less experienced workers, aging equipment, tighter budgets, and the most intense shift of all, the arrival of delivery apps. Suddenly, kitchens that once served predictable waves of customers were being hit with constant, chaotic floods of orders at all hours. 10 orders could come through the app in the span of a minute on top of the customers physically standing at the counter. It became almost impossible to maintain the precise timing the chicken required. Workers weren't heroes in aprons anymore. They were firefighters, trying to put out new flames every 60 seconds. Under that kind of pressure, the system didn't just bend, it began to warp. Chicken cooked a minute too long or a minute too short, batches left in holding cabinets longer than ideal, breading rushed, timers ignored because 6 other timers were screaming at the same time, fries softening because drivers were stuck in traffic, gravy cooling because the kitchen had no time to stir. And all of these small, invisible compromises became the flavor of inconsistency customers felt in their mouths without knowing why. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't apathy. This was exhaustion. Pressure doing what pressure always does, breaking the parts of the system that can no longer carry the weight. The moment delivery apps became a dominant force in UK food culture, the old KFC quietly ceased to exist. The rhythm that kept its kitchens running collapsed. The balance between quality and speed shattered. And the brand, once confident enough to take its consistency for granted, entered a new era, one defined by unpredictability, the franchise divide. As delivery orders pushed kitchens beyond their limits, another issue began rising quietly beneath the surface, one that customers couldn't see but could feel in every disappointing meal. KFC in the UK wasn't a single unified organism. It was a network of hundreds of franchises, each with its own management style, priorities, and operational standards. And while the logo remained the same, the experience began drifting further and further apart, depending on who owned the building you walked into. Some franchisees treated their stores like precision-run machines. They invested heavily in training, maintenance, equipment upgrades, and staffing. These were the branches where the chicken felt familiar, the floors gleamed, the staff looked calm, and the food tasted like someone genuinely cared. But others, facing shrinking budgets, rising costs, and labor shortages, operated with far thinner margins of error. They didn't have enough staff to cover evening rushes. They couldn't afford to lose experienced team members, yet they constantly did. Training became something done quickly, sometimes desperately, in the pressure of a live shift. Equipment repairs were delayed. Oil changes took a back seat to sheer survival. And slowly, the difference between a good KFC and a bad one widened into something customers could no longer ignore. You could walk half a mile in some cities and find 2 KFCs offering entirely different realities. One branch served chicken so perfect it tasted nostalgic. The other felt like someone had described the recipe verbally and hoped for the best. The brand promised consistency, but the franchise system, under increasing economic strain, could no longer guarantee it. Customers didn't know the story behind the counter. They didn't know the franchisee's financial situation, or the impact of rising ingredient prices, or the struggle to hire, train, and retain staff who could give the chicken the attention it required. All they knew was that the bucket they collected tasted nothing like the bucket they remembered. And so the trust faltered. The hygiene pattern no one could ignore. The surest sign that a brand is slipping isn't in the taste of the food, but in the places the public rarely looks unless something feels wrong. Across the UK, hygiene ratings began to reveal something KFC likely wished would stay quiet. Some stores maintained their perfect 5, a testament to careful management even under pressure. Others dropped to a 3, then a 2, and in some concerning cases, even lower. You didn't need to be a food safety expert to understand what this meant. A drop in hygiene rating in a chain as big and established as KFC wasn't just a small misstep. It was a warning. Something behind the scenes wasn't getting the attention it needed. A kitchen running smoothly has the time and manpower to clean as it works. A kitchen struggling to keep up with demand doesn't. When the orders pile up, the fryers overflow, the preparation areas get messy, and sanitization becomes something done quickly rather than thoroughly. Toys get pushed into corners instead of cleaned. Breading spills are left until the shift ends. Equipment that needs a careful wipe down gets a rushed pass with a cloth. Customers rarely check these ratings before they order, but they feel the consequences even if they don't realize it. When a branch is barely staying afloat, the food tastes rushed, the environment feels stressed, and the meal leaves you with questions you never used to ask. It wasn't that KFC suddenly stopped caring about cleanliness. It was the inevitable result of a system running at full speed without enough hands on the wheel. The changing face of the customer experience. At the same time, the public's relationship with fast food was changing. People weren't just walking into stores anymore. They were scrolling. They were tapping. They were choosing their meals the same way they chose films to stream effortlessly, instantly, with the expectation of speed. KFC was suddenly competing not just with other chicken shops, but with convenience itself. And convenience is a ruthless opponent. Customers didn't want to wait. They didn't tolerate delays. When their delivery arrived cold, soggy, or missing something, the frustration cut deeper because the emotional expectation was different. People wanted KFC not just as food, but as comfort, fast comfort, reliable comfort. And when that comfort stumbled, the disappointment didn't stay quiet. Social media amplified every bad experience. Pictures of undercooked chicken spread quickly. Videos of disorganized kitchens went viral. Reviews became harsher, more emotional, more impatient. And KFC, once the chain that avoided scandal purely by consistency, found itself in the unfamiliar position of defending quality. The decline wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was everywhere, felt in the bite that tasted wrong, the fries that seemed off, the service that felt drained, and collectively, these small disappointments built a story no brand wants attached to its name. A story of fading trust. The economics of a strained system. Behind all of this lay a reality few customers think about when they collect their £6 box meal. Running a KFC branch in the UK is more expensive than ever. The price of chicken has risen sharply in recent years. Oil, flour, spices and packaging all cost more. Energy bills have climbed. Minimum wage has increased. Rent isn't getting cheaper. And every one of these pressures lands squarely on franchise owners, forcing them to balance financial survival with operational integrity. In a perfect world, every KFC would have enough staff to maintain flawless service. Every fryer would be the latest model. Every shift would run smoothly. Every ingredient would be treated with meticulous care. But franchisees aren't operating in perfect conditions. They're operating in increasingly challenging ones. And when budgets tighten, the first thing to suffer is usually the very thing customers notice most: consistency. Not because anyone wants it to decline, but because maintaining the old standard requires time, labor, and resources that the modern economic landscape doesn't always allow. This is the invisible side of fast food, the part customers never see but always taste. The delivery disconnect. By the time delivery apps became the dominant way people ordered KFC, the chain had already lost the breathing room that once allowed it to maintain its quality. Now, something new began to happen. The food was no longer just a product of the kitchen, it was a product of the journey. A chicken piece that was perfect when boxed might become soft by the time it reached the customer. A burger assembled neatly might shift, smear or collapse inside a bag swinging on the back of a motorbike. Fries that were crisp 2 minutes after frying became limp 10 minutes into a delivery ride. Gravy that left the kitchen steaming arrived lukewarm if the driver made multiple stops. And yet customers didn't blame the delivery route, they blamed the brand. Of course they did. The name on the bag wasn't Uber Eats, it was KFC. This disconnect created a new problem. Customers were judging KFC on factors KFC couldn't fully control, and while the chain tried to adapt changing packaging, adjusting preparation techniques, reorganizing workflows, the sheer volume of delivery orders made perfection almost impossible. KFC had become a chain built for counter-service operating in an era of doorstep delivery. It was a recipe for decline long before the flavor ever changed. The sadness in the decline. What makes this decline so striking isn't just the drop in quality, it's the emotional impact. People didn't grow up loving KFC because it was luxurious or rare. They loved it because it was comfort food that understood its purpose. It wasn't trying to impress anyone, it was trying to be reliable, and in many ways, it succeeded for years. That's why the change hurts. Because fried chicken was never supposed to be complicated. It was supposed to be simple, dependable, familiar, something you didn't have to think about. And now, people think about it too much. They hesitate before ordering. They wonder if it will be worth it. They question what happened to the chain they trusted. And the irony is that the decline isn't the result of apathy. It's the result of pressure. Too much pressure. The kind of pressure that reshapes even the strongest brands from the inside out. The identity crisis inside the bucket. Some declines are loud. They shatter reputations instantly. Others creep in so gradually that the brand barely realizes it's happening until the public starts to whisper. KFC's decline is the quiet kind, not a scandal, not a collapse, more like a long exhale of a chain that used to know exactly what it was, slowly losing its definition. On paper, KFC still looks the same. The logo hasn't changed, the color palette hasn't changed, the recipes claim to be the same, but the brand behind it has shifted. It's trying to exist in a world that no longer resembles the one it was built for. The KFC of the 90s and early 2000s knew its purpose. It was a simple, dependable, dine-in and takeaway experience. A place where you actually sat down with people, shared food, made small talk, wiped your hands with warm towelettes, and left feeling like you'd eaten something worth the calories. Now, KFC exists in a world defined by speed, fast orders, fast deliveries, fast consumption, fast complaints. The shift from communal food to isolated convenience reshaped what customers expect, and KFC, trapped between its heritage and the demands of modern efficiency, found itself caught in the middle. The chain hasn't just struggled with operational pressure, it's struggled with purpose. What does KFC want to be in the delivery era? A comfort food institution? A quick service machine? A nostalgia-driven brand? A value chain? A premium chicken destination? It tries to be all of them at once, and in the process, its sense of identity is stretched thin. This confusion is why customers walk away feeling unsettled. They aren't just reacting to the food, they're reacting to a brand that feels unsure of itself. A bucket that used to symbolize togetherness now often arrives in a paper bag with loose fries and a lukewarm burger. The contrast between what it was and what it has become is so stark that the experience creates a kind of cultural whiplash, the feeling that you're mourning something while still holding it in your hands. The cost of disappointment. When a luxury brand stumbles, disappointment feels snobbish. When a fast food chain stumbles, disappointment feels personal. People relied on KFC in a way they don't rely on fine dining. They counted on it during long work weeks, after stressful days, when they needed something familiar to ground them. That's why the decline evokes such a strong emotional response. The disappointment isn't dramatic, it's quiet. It shows up when someone drives home excited for a treat and opens the box to find chicken that looks tired. It appears when a parent buys a meal for their children and feels guilty when the fries come out undercooked. It's in the moment someone orders delivery because they're exhausted and ends up staring at a meal that doesn't match what they paid for. Disappointment, when repeated, turns into avoidance. Not because customers stop liking the brand, but because they stop trusting it. And trust is the real currency of fast food. People forgive imperfections. They don't forgive unpredictability. KFC's inconsistency didn't just damage its flavor, it damaged its reliability, the real reason people chose it for generations. The silent revolt. As the quality fluctuated, something subtle began happening across the UK. Customers didn't stage protests or demand public apologies. They simply redirected their loyalty. Local chicken shops, once overshadowed by the global chain, started gaining ground. They offered something KFC had lost, the feeling of care. Even when the food wasn't perfect, it felt intentional. The portions felt generous. The seasoning tasted alive. The staff knew the regulars. These independents weren't burdened by massive delivery volumes or rigid corporate structures. Their kitchens weren't overwhelmed by endless pings from apps. They cooked smaller batches. They seasoned by hand. They made adjustments based on feedback without needing corporate approval. And customers noticed. It wasn't just a shift in preference. It was a quiet revolt, one driven not by anger, but by longing. People missed the warmth KFC once had, and if they couldn't find it there anymore, they found it elsewhere. At the same time, newer chains stepped in, brands with fresher menus, crispier coatings, spicier seasonings, faster service models built specifically for the delivery era. They weren't carrying the weight of nostalgia the way KFC was. They came into the market lean, flexible, ready to thrive in the world KFC was struggling to adapt to. And while KFC still has name recognition, recognition isn't enough when the experience no longer matches the expectation. The truth about fast food and time. All fast food chains evolve, Some grow sharper with age, others grow softer. KFC's decline reveals something larger about the nature of fast food in the UK. The demands of modern convenience don't just change how food is delivered. They change how food is made. The faster people expect their meals, the less time a kitchen has for quality control. The cheaper people expect their meals, the fewer resources a restaurant has to maintain meticulous standards. The more a brand tries to stretch itself across franchises, delivery platforms, and shifting customer desires, the more its identity dissolves. KFC didn't decline because it became careless. It declined because it tried to maintain a decades-old promise in a world where the conditions for that promise no longer exist. Time changed the system faster than the system could adapt, and KFC found itself trying to operate an orchestra with too many musicians missing. The truth is simple: fried chicken made with care cannot be rushed. It cannot be overlooked. It cannot be mass-produced under pressure without giving up something essential. And the thing KFC gave up was consistency. The one ingredient that once tied the brand together. The possibility of rebirth. Yet decline isn't the end of a story. Sometimes it's the necessary moment before transformation. The moment a brand is forced to confront what it has lost and decide what it wants to reclaim. KFC still has something powerful, an emotional imprint that no new chicken shop can replicate. People remember the good KFC. They remember the version without compromises, without frantic kitchens, without strained systems. That nostalgia is not a burden, it's an anchor. And if the chain ever returns to its roots, that anchor will become its greatest advantage. Rebirth won't come from new menu items or marketing campaigns. It won't come from adding more sauces or launching another limited edition burger. It will come from something far less glamorous and far more fundamental. Rebuilding consistency. Better staffing, better training, better pay, better equipment, better pacing, better expectations, better franchise accountability, better balance between delivery and dine-in, better respect for the craft of fried chicken. If KFC can find a way to reclaim the meaning it once had, it could return stronger than ever. Not louder, not trendier, but steadier. The way it used to be. The way people still hope it can be. The final takeaway. So don't eat at KFC in the UK again until you understand what has really changed and why it matters. The decline isn't just about food, it's about trust. It's about a beloved chain pulled in too many directions by a world changing faster than it could keep up. It's about the gap between what a brand promises and what its reality now looks like. But decline does not erase legacy, it challenges it. And sometimes the only way for a brand to return to greatness is to acknowledge the fall that made it human again. KFC was never just fried chicken. It was a cultural companion, a piece of British comfort woven into everyday life. And maybe, somewhere under the pressure and the chaos and the inconsistency, that version still exists. Maybe it's waiting for the system around it to slow down, breathe, and find its rhythm again. Until then, approach with caution, reflect on what changed, and remember the taste of what it once was. Not to mourn it, but to recognize it if it ever returns. If you found this deep dive eye-opening, make sure you subscribe because we're just getting started.